Okay, I think I'm ready to go. All right, so the big idea is when solving an equation with square roots, the objective is to first isolate the square root on one side of the equation, then square both sides. So what I want you to see is that I'm going to do a little exploration. If x equals 4 and you square both sides of the equation, you get x squared equals 16. Can you see that? What are the solutions to the new equation? William, what are the solutions now to x squared equals 16?
4, negative 4.
Good job. You get 4 or negative 4. But look at my original equation. What happened? Avery, what happened from the original equation to now what I have? You have a negative 4 that isn't in the original, okay? So what happened is we generated an extra solution. Okay, we generated, sorry, I don't have my Apple Pen today, so you can see my finger, it's not working real well. So when you square both sides of an equation, we have to be careful. We have to be more careful than a regular equation. When you square both sides of an equation, we create the possibility of what's called an extraneous solution, or extraneous solutions, plural. So this is true with squaring both sides of an equation. So in example 1, when you want to square both sides, you have to be sure when you're done that you check your solutions. So I'm going to write down some steps for us. Step 1, isolate the square root. Okay, step 1, isolate the square root. Well, in letter A, the square root, I have 1 on each side. Step 2, square both sides. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to square both sides. So that leaves me with 4x plus 5 equals 3x minus 7. Step 3, solve the resulting equation. All right, so do that with your 4x plus 5 equals 3x minus 7. Go ahead and solve that equation. That's actually an algebra 1 type equation. So if I subtract 3x from both sides and subtract the 5, I'm getting x equals negative 12. Step 4 is check your answer. Check your answer. What that means is you go to the original equation and you take 4 times negative 12 plus 5, and I want to know, will that equal 3 times negative 12 minus 7? And something I need to tell you about is when we're solving these square root equations, we do want to do these in the real numbers, not the complex, okay? So I should go back and say, solve these over the real numbers. So what that means is I can't have a negative under the square root with this type of equation. So this one does not work because I end up with a negative. So there's no solution.
Will it be no solution at any time? Like, do you have to plug it back in and just see if there's no solution?
You have to.
If it's a negative, can you just see that it'll be like no solution?
So it's not necessarily that because x was negative 12, it's when I plug it in, I end up with a negative under the square root. If you can tell that, then yes, you know that that's not going to work. But that's a great question. What if I had, say, the square root of 5 minus x? So I just don't want you to be misled that x being a negative doesn't guarantee it won't work. Does everybody see that? Can I get eyeballs up on the marker board? If I had 5 minus x, 5 minus negative 12 could work, okay? Could work. All right, but that was an excellent question. All right, in letter B, what's different about letter A to letter B? What do you notice that's different? Yeah, Brendan?
Both square roots are on the same side.
Okay, both square roots are on the same side. So what would we need to do here in order to get one square root on each side? Matthew, what do you think?
You add square root 2x minus 1 to the other side.
You got it. And so when I say step 1 is isolate the square root, that means you get 1 on each side, okay? Step 2, square both sides. So we get x plus 3 equals 2x minus 1. Step 3, solve the resulting equation. Oops. So I'm getting x equals 4. Drew, what is step 4? Check your answer. So, and again, I don't mean to mislead you here, but you always go to the original equation, okay? You've got to go up to the original equation. So this is 4 plus 3 minus the square root of 2 times 4 minus 1. Does that equal 0? So I get square root 7 minus square root 7. Does that work? Yes, that does work. So what I do is when I'm solving square root equations, I make sure that after I check them, that's when I circle or box my answers. Okay. All right, I'm going to pause a moment, and I want you to try letter C. Step 1 is isolate the square root, square both sides, solve the resulting equation, and check your solution. Something different happens here. Nick, what's different about letter C than A and B?
There's only one square root.
Good job. There's only one square root. So, Mackenzie, what do I need to do to isolate the square root? Yes, you're going to add 11. And so do you see when I add 11, then I do have the square root alone. All right, Sarah, what is step 2? Square both sides. So a square root and a square cancel. 11 times 11 is 121. X is 120. Max, what is step 4? Check. So let's go check. I get 120 plus 1 minus 11, and I put a little question mark. Does that equal 0? 121 square root. So the answer is yes, it works. All right, try letter D. Okay, try letter D. I'm going to ask you to not do E yet because we need to be a little bit more careful there. All right, Lily, what is step 1? Isolate the square root. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides. Then, Hannah, what's step 2? Square both sides. So you get 2x minus 3 equals 81. Then, Jake, what's step 3?
Solve the equation.
Solve the equation. And then, Cal, what's step 4? Plug it back in to check. So I'm going to get 2 times 42 minus 3 minus 5, and I want to know, does that equal 4? So that's the square root of 81, which is 9 minus 5, and that does work. All right, so now E, we're going to take it up a notch, but we're still going through the same process. So Mia, what is step 1 in solving square root equations? Isolate the square root. So I'm going to add 2x to both sides. Then Matthew, what is step 2?
Square both sides.
Square both sides. Now, on the left side, when you take a square root and you square it, they cancel. On the right side, you're taking whatever's over there times itself. So, DP, what's 2x times 2x? 4x squared. Then, Sarah, what's step 3? Solve. Hey, what kind of equation is it when it has x squared as the highest power? Quadratic. So we're going to put it in general form. And the bummer is this one doesn't factor. I could do completing the square or quadratic formula. Any preference?
square.
Let's complete the square. That does look a little easier. I'm going to pull out the x. And I'm going to add the 5. So x squared plus 2x plus 1. So I'm going to add the 4. So then I'm going to get plus or minus the square root. So I get -1 plus or minus 3/2. You never, ever leave an answer like this. You can figure that out. -1 plus 3/2 is 1/2. -1 minus 3/2 is -5/2. All right, questions? Now we got to check those. We got to check those. All right, so step 4, let's go back up and let's check them. If I do the square root of 5 minus 8 times 1/2 minus 2 times 1/2, I want to know if that's going to be 0. So do you see that that's 5 minus 4 is 1, square root 1 is 1, minus 1, so this one works. Then let's go check the other one. 5 minus 8 times -5/2 minus 2 times -5/2. So that's 4. Is that square root 25 plus 5 equals 0? Does that one work? That one does not work. Did I do something wrong here? Something like doesn't look right. Anybody see a mistake? Or does it look okay?
Yeah, I think the 5 should have been negative.
Five
Because
minus
when you
8x.
square root, it's positive, so you're minusing 5 to get to the other side.
Which part?
See, 0 equals 4x squared plus 8x minus 5.
Yeah.
I think that should be plus.
Well, it's not because you have 5 minus 8x, so I'm subtracting that.
I think you put an extra 4 in something. Because you put 5 plus 4 equals 4 times x squared plus 2x plus.
Okay, so so I squared both sides, like something doesn't look right here. So I got 5 minus 8x, 2x times 2x is 4x squared. So I added 8x and subtracted the 5.
Why did you subtract the 5 then?
I know, I should have left it over there. I should have left that 5 over here.
You're right.
Do you think it's right? So then you pulled out the 4, that's x squared plus 2x. Take half of 2, which is 1, and square it. But I've technically added 1, so that's a 9. 9/4. -1 plus 3/2 is a +1/2. I know, but I did it with quadratic formula and I'm getting a different answer. So I'm like, so like I feel like I made a mistake somewhere.
I got a -4. I don't know. Like when I'm completing the square.
It looks right? Okay. All right, we're going with it. We're going with it. Okay.
Maybe we checked it wrong.
So I have 5 minus 8 times 1/2. 5 minus 4 is 1. 2 times 1/2 is 1. 1 minus 1. So the 1/2 works. The -5/2. So I have 5 minus 8. The two negatives become a plus. 2 goes into 8 4 times. So 5 plus 20 is 25. This is a -2, so that ends up being a plus, so that doesn't work. Okay, so I got the 1/2. Let me go ahead and erase to do the part F. I'm going to have to look at what I did with quadratic formula. Maybe I made the mistake there. Okay, so now this is something interesting in letter F. Step 1 is isolate the square root, okay? Isolate the square root. Now, this is where the tricky part comes in. I'm squaring the left side and I'm squaring the entire right side. There is no math property that says if I have C equals A plus B, that C squared equals A squared plus B squared. I'm not in Pythagorean theorem, okay? I cannot say that 3 plus 4 equals 7 is 3 squared plus 4 squared equals 7 squared. That's not true. So what I do know, and what I've been doing, and maybe we didn't realize we were doing it, is we were squaring the other side. We were taking it times itself. So this is going to be one of the hardest parts. Oh, I did figure my mistake. Okay. Yeah, we did do it right on that other one. All right, go ahead and multiply out that right side. Get everything on one side equal to 0. Let's see if you can finish this one on your own. So I'm getting 2x minus 1 equals 4 minus 4x plus x squared. I'm going to get everything on one side equal to 0. Oh, so it's a really good thing we just spent the entire unit on solving quadratic equations. This one factors into x minus 5 times x minus 1. So I get x equals 5 or x equals 1. We do need to check them. So when I do the 5, I get square root 9, which is 3 plus 5 is 8. The 5 doesn't work. Okay, the 5 doesn't work. And if I plug in 1, I get 1 plus 1 is 2. This one does work. Something I want to mention. When you're solving square root equations, sometimes you only get one answer and it can work or not work. if you get two answers, it's possible that both work, it's possible one works, and it's possible neither works. When neither works, that's no solution, okay? All right, so the big idea here today, when you are solving a square root equation, step 1, isolate the square root. Step 2, square both sides. Be careful in a problem like letter F. If you end up with a sum or difference on the right side, you have to take it times itself. There's no distributive property for exponents. Step 3, solve the resulting equation. If it's quadratic, you can factor, square root method, completing the square, or quadratic formula. You've got options now. And step 4, check for extraneous solutions. All right, so who cares? Who cares about square root equations? There's actually a ton of real-world applications. Here's one. The Cave of Swallows is a natural open-air pit cave in the state of San Luis Potosi, Mexico. The 1,220-foot deep cave was a popular destination for base jumpers. The function t equals 1/4 square root d represents the time t in seconds that it takes a base jumper to fall d feet. How far does a base jumper fall in 3 seconds? All right, so go ahead and try to solve this equation. One of the things I hope is by the end of this school year, you will be very comfortable with word problems. Word problems are not that scary. For some reason, students are afraid of them, when in fact you're given letters. You've got to figure out, what do the letters represent? What am I trying to find? And you'll be able to plug in usually most numbers and only have one letter left. So how far does a base jumper fall in t seconds? You're going to get 3 equals 1/4 square root d. What is step 1? Isolate. So what do I have to do to both sides of this equation in order to isolate my square root? Multiply both sides by 4. So you get 12 equals the square root of d. Is my square root alone? Yes. What is step 2? Square both sides. I get 144 equals d. It's done. Just do a quick check. So I get, does 3 equal 1/4 the square root of 144? The answer is yes. When you have a word problem, check for units. How far does a base jumper fall in 3 seconds? The base jumper falls 144 feet.